Never in all my 82 years did I expect my own daughter-in-law to broom me off like yesterday's crumbs. She stood in the doorway, heart thudding, knuckles white, yet her voice rang with unspent fire. From the first seconds, it was clear this old woman would not be dismissed easily. Eleanor Madison had always been the glue of her family, widowed young, raising two sons with grit and grace, running a small family cafe that doubled as the neighborhood's heart. In this quiet town, everyone knew Eleanor's apple pies and warm laughter. But these days, those pies cooled on the racks, and her sons whispered behind closed doors. Her younger son, Thomas, married Claire 2 years ago. At first, Claire seemed sweet, ambitious, eager to fit in. But gradually, Eleanor sensed a shift. Claire's soft words became sharp demands. And then came the night that snapped everything into stark relief for reasons Eleanor still questioned. Claire banned her from the weekly family dinners. The cafe? Off-limits too. Humiliation burned. But more than that, disbelief. Family meant sanctuary. How could Claire turn the tables and brand Eleanor persona non grata? So Eleanor drove down Main Street that night, parked across from the cafe's lights. Through the window, she saw the table her family eating without her. She laughed softly, bitter laughter. Then, as the owner was her grandson, she marched inside and asked boldly, "Table for one right beside them. Because he's family." This was not defiance for the sake of defiance. It was anchored in love, memory, and the conviction that belonging could not be erased so easily. Eleanor's request sent ripples through the small restaurant. Regular patrons froze mid-chew. Claire's fork clattered into her salad. Thomas looked up, shock in his eyes. The owner grandson, Lucas, hesitated behind the register, torn between mother and grandmother. Eleanor remembers the moment's wait as vividly as the scent of freshly baked bread. She asked the owner quietly but firmly, "Because he's family." Lucas's face registered recognition of his grandmother's voice, a reminder of childhood bedtime stories, of homemade cookies, of comfort. Yet Claire stood, face flushed, arms folded. She hissed that Eleanor was stirring trouble, embarrassing them in front of customers. Eleanor held still. She breathed. Every eye in the cafe watched. In that charged silence, she realized that this act would change everything: her place in the family, her son's loyalty, even the loyalty of the small community that loved her cafe. As she sat alone at that reserved table, memories flooded. Laughter with Thomas as a boy, the day she and her late husband opened the cafe, the pride in Thomas when he graduated. She recognized that Claire's venom came from fear that Claire would never measure up, fear that this matriarch would overshadow her. Eleanor's internal conflict deepened. Should she have done this? Was she forcing confrontation that might fracture the family forever? But retreat, she knew, meant erasure. The tension snapped when Claire found Eleanor's single white rose in a vase on her table, the same rose type Eleanor used to send to Thomas on his birthdays. It was Lucas's doing, a silent olive branch. Claire erupted, accusing Lucas of betrayal. Lucas countered, "She's my grandmother." Voices rose. Patrons murmured, some stood. Thomas intervened, his own voice trembling. "Mom, this is Grandma. She helped raise me." He turned to Eleanor. "Mom, I didn't know Claire banned you." Eleanor's heart cracked a little. Thomas didn't know he hurt her. But she steadied her voice. "I just wanted to say I love you, and I belong." A hush fell. Claire's anger wavered. Guilt flickered across her face. The cafe owner gently offered to close a section so they could talk privately. In that moment, Eleanor understood. Love doesn't demand permission. It won't be silenced. The air shifted. A few tears dripped. Then Claire stepped away from her plate, walked over, and knelt in front of Eleanor's table. In that simple gesture across uneasy space, Claire asked, "I'm sorry." The word trembled with fear, pride, longing for belonging. They talked long into the emptying cafe. Not long enough to erase wounds, but enough to open a door. Claire admitted loneliness in her marriage, pressure to support Thomas financially, fear that she would always be outsider. Thomas apologized for not noticing Eleanor's absence earlier and pledged balance. Eleanor forgave. She didn't excuse, but she forgave. Thomas reunited grandmother and mother into future dinners. Lucas brought her favorite pie. The cafe buzz returned, and customers smiled when they saw Eleanor back behind the counter. She welcomed them, quietly proud she had reclaimed her place. Later, After closing, Eleanor stood alone in the dim cafe, the rose now wilted but still beautiful. She reflected, aging doesn't erase dignity. Family bonds can bend, but they can mend. Even when love is tested, love endures. The next morning, Eleanor sat by her kitchen window, cradling a chipped mug of tea. Sunlight spilled across the counter, catching the dust in the air, dust that hadn't been there when the house was full of boys, laughter, movement. Her body ached in places that used to be strong, yet her heart felt clearer than it had in weeks. She replayed the scene from the cafe, the tightness in her chest when Claire's face hardened, the subtle tremor in Thomas's voice, Lucas's quiet defiance. And Claire kneeling. It hadn't been a fairy tale ending, but it was something, a start. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. When she opened it, she found Lucas. Tall, broad-shouldered, his barista apron hanging loosely around his neck like it always did when he was nervous. He held a box in one hand, a shy grin on his face. "I brought croissants," he said. "Figure we could talk. About last night. About everything." She gestured him in. "Only if you stay long enough to help me fix that old ceiling fan. It sounds like it's about to launch into orbit." He laughed, then sobered. "You didn't deserve that, Grandma. Any of it." "I know," she said softly. "But I also know things are never as simple as who's right and who's wrong. Tell me what's really going on." Lucas sat at the table and unwrapped the pastries. "Claire, she's been under a lot of pressure. Business has been tight. She's scared. And you? Well, you're intimidating, Grandma." Eleanor's eyebrow shot up. "Me? Intimidating? In a good way." Lucas raised his hands. "You've built something. You're loved. Claire walks into that cafe, and she feels like a guest in someone else's legacy." Eleanor stirred her tea, letting that sink in. She had never meant to overshadow, but she understood the quiet ways insecurity bloomed. "She could have just said that," she muttered, "instead of treating me like a ghost." "She doesn't know how," Lucas replied. "Her family was different. Quiet. Distant. You ask her about her parents, and she changes the subject." They sat in silence for a moment, chewing slowly. Then Eleanor said, "I'm not leaving that cafe, Lucas. I know. And I'm not going to fade from this family to make Claire feel tall. I wouldn't ask you to." She looked at her grandson, eyes steady. "But I'll make room. For her, too. If she's willing to meet me halfway." Lucas nodded. "I'll talk to her." That afternoon, Claire did not come. Nor did she call. A week passed. Eleanor returned to the cafe on Wednesday. Regulars greeted her like nothing had changed. Some gave knowing smiles, others offered quiet pats on the arm. One older gentleman, Mr. Davidson, brought her a tulip from his garden. The town always rallied around Eleanor Madison. Then one afternoon, Claire appeared. She came in with a customer, her co-worker from the marketing firm. Eleanor watched them enter, order coffee, and sit near the back. Claire didn't look her way, but Eleanor noticed the flicker the way Claire's eyes darted toward the kitchen, how her hands fidgeted. Eleanor stepped out from behind the counter. She didn't rush. She didn't hover. She walked slowly to the back table and asked, gently, "Mind if I say hello?" Claire looked up. Her expression was unreadable, but she nodded. Her co-worker smiled awkwardly. "I'll just, check the restroom." When they were alone, Eleanor spoke first. "I heard about your promotion," she said. "Marketing director?" Claire blinked. "I didn't think you'd thank you." "I keep up," Eleanor said with a smile. "Always have. Especially with family." Claire nodded, quiet. Eleanor continued. "I didn't come here to shame you. I came to say that I understand fear, and pressure, and loneliness, more than you think." Claire's eyes welled. "I didn't mean to cut you out. I didn't know how to be part of something that already belonged to someone else." "That cafe has space for both of us," Eleanor said. "And so does this family." Claire's voice cracked. "I'm not trying to replace you." "I never thought you were," Eleanor replied. "But you tried to erase me. That's what hurt." Claire swallowed. "I'm sorry." Eleanor sat across from her. "You don't have to be me, or bake pies, or charm the town. But you have to respect where you came into the story." "I can do that," Claire whispered. They sat there, not quite friends, not yet family. But they sat. It was a beginning. In the months that followed, Eleanor and Claire formed an uneasy truce that evolved slowly into something warmer. They cooked together, sometimes. Claire asked for Eleanor's apple pie recipe. Eleanor suggested new ideas for the cafe's menu, which Claire began designing. Their laughter didn't always come easy, But it came. On one late afternoon, Eleanor stood in the kitchen with Thomas, icing a lemon cake. He leaned against the counter, watching her work. "You know," he said, "you scared the hell out of me that night." Eleanor grinned. "Good. Maybe next time you'll call your mother." He chuckled. "Seriously, though? You didn't just walk back in there. You reminded all of us what family means." Eleanor smoothed the frosting. "It means we show up, even when we're not invited." Thomas nodded. "Thank you for not walking away." She looked at him, warmth in her eyes. "Thank you for finally looking up." Lucas walked in then, waving 2 envelopes. "Guess who got nominated for the town's Small Business Award? Us." Cheers filled the kitchen. Claire walked in moments later, hearing the celebration. Eleanor looked at her and smiled. "Yes, Claire," she said. "Us." The award ceremony was a small town affair, folding chairs, paper lanterns strung across the community center ceiling, and the scent of lemonade and pot roast hanging in the air. Eleanor arrived in her pressed navy blouse, the same one she wore when they opened the cafe decades ago. It still fit, barely, but it carried memory like a second skin. Claire stood beside the dessert table, nervously brushing crumbs from her black slacks. She glanced up as Eleanor entered, and for the first time, her smile looked easy. They didn't hug not yet, but they greeted each other without tension, and that, Eleanor thought, was its own kind of grace. When the cafe's name was called, the small crowd erupted. Lucas stood, flushed with pride, and walked up with Claire and Eleanor flanking him. Thomas snapped photos with his phone, his arm around his mother's shoulder. The MC, a portly man with a bow tie too tight around his neck, handed them the plaque. "Madison K. family owned, community loved," he said, beaming. "And still kicking." Eleanor chuckled as they walked off stage. "Still kicking," she muttered. "I'll put that on my headstone." Later that night, back at the cafe, the award sat on the counter beside a tray of fresh pastries. Eleanor stood alone at the sink, rinsing out the final coffee pot. Claire came up behind her. "You know," Claire said, "people think you're hard to approach. Tough." Eleanor didn't turn around. "And what do you think?" "I think you had to be. To raise 2 boys alone. To run this place. To stay standing when life knocked you down." Eleanor set the pot aside, drying her hands on a towel. "You don't grow thick skin because you like it. You do it because life doesn't give you a choice." Claire leaned on the counter. "I was jealous of you. Still am sometimes." "Why?" Eleanor asked, genuinely surprised. "Because everyone loves you. You walk into a room, and people light up. I walk in, and they compare me to you." Eleanor let out a soft breath. "You know the thing about love? It's not a pie. You don't run out just because someone else gets a slice." Claire blinked, and something softened in her eyes. "I want to do better," she said. Eleanor looked at her then. Really looked. Past the strained smiles and awkward dinners. Past the prickly pride. And in Claire's face, she saw not an enemy, but a woman trying. A woman afraid. "Start by sitting with me at breakfast," Eleanor said. "Tomorrow. Just us. No tension. No judging. Just coffee and eggs." Claire nodded. "I'd like that." The next morning, they met at the cafe before sunrise. The windows fogged with steam from the griddle, and the world outside was still and quiet. They talked about everything and nothing. The latest book Claire was reading. A customer who left a ridiculous Yelp review. Claire's fear of public speaking. Eleanor's secret favorite movie, not Casablanca, like she claimed, but Legally Blonde. And then, as the sun filtered through the glass, Eleanor asked, "Why did you ban me from dinner?" Claire didn't flinch. "Because I was scared. I thought if I could control the space, I could finally feel like I belonged in it." Eleanor nodded. "And did you?" "No," Claire admitted. "It just made me lonelier." They sipped their coffee in silence. "I can't promise I won't mess up again," Claire said. "But I don't want to keep you out anymore. I want to find a way to build something with you." Eleanor reached over and placed her hand over Claire's. "Then let's do it. Slowly. Brick by brick." Over the following weeks, the cafe flourished. Customers noticed the change not just in the food, which Claire helped modernize without erasing Eleanor's touch, but in the atmosphere. There was laughter again. Music. More light. And for the first time, Eleanor stepped back just a little. She let Claire take the lead on the cafe's online presence. Claire started an Instagram page, posted photos of Eleanor's pies with witty captions, and even launched a Sunday spotlight, where they featured regular customers with short stories. One day, Claire asked Eleanor if she wanted to write the captions herself. Eleanor blinked. Me? With hashtags and whatnot. Why not? Claire smiled. People want to hear from you. You're the soul of this place. So Eleanor wrote. Short, heartfelt blurbs about her memories tied to each dish. About her late husband's favorite stew. About the smell of cinnamon and childhood. The posts went viral, at least, small-town viral. Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. And suddenly, Eleanor became more than a cook. She became a storyteller. But not everything was seamless. One Sunday afternoon, Claire came into the back office with puffy eyes. She had just gotten off a tense phone call with her mother. Eleanor offered her a seat, poured her a glass of iced tea. I'm just tired, Claire said, of never being good enough. For her. For you. For anyone. Eleanor sat beside her. You are good enough. You've always been. Your mother didn't teach you that. But that's not your fault. Claire looked down at her lap. I'm trying to believe that. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You don't have to become me, Claire, or live up to me. You just have to be willing to be seen. Claire nodded, tears brimming. Thank you. And that was when Eleanor realized something she hadn't expected. Claire had become part of her story, not the villain, not the rival, but the kind of daughter she never had. Complicated. Stubborn. Brave. Months passed. The cafe earned its second award. Lucas was promoted to co-manager. Thomas started attending family dinners regularly, and they became joyful, warm, and finally complete. One night, after everyone had left, Eleanor sat alone in her favorite booth. The same one she'd occupied that first night Claire banned her. Now, the seat carried different weight. Not rejection, but resilience. Claire walked over and slid in across from her. I made something, she said, pulling out a folder. Inside was a draft for a cookbook, The Madison Cafe Legacy, Recipes and Stories Across Generations. Eleanor leafed through the pages. Photos of her pies. Old family photos scanned with care. Little anecdotes Claire had collected from her, from Lucas, even from Thomas. Eleanor looked up, stunned. You did all this? Claire smiled. I thought it was time we told our story. All of it. Not just the food, but what it took to stay a family. Eleanor's throat tightened. You're something else, Claire. So are you. And in that quiet booth, beneath the golden lights and scent of cinnamon and coffee, Eleanor finally felt something shift. This wasn't just a return. It was a rebirth. Winter came early that year. By November, frost clung to the cafe windows every morning, and Eleanor's joints ached before her feet hit the floor. She told no one about the tightness in her chest that woke her at night or the fatigue that lingered like smoke. She had weathered worse. But something had shifted. One morning, she found herself unable to open the jar of preserves. Her hands, once so steady with pie crusts and piping bags, now trembled slightly when she reached for her teacup. She laughed it off with Claire and Lucas, but when she went home, she cried silently, face pressed to her pillow, the kind of cry that came not from pain, but from loss. Loss of certainty, of strength, of time. That night, she wrote a letter. She didn't say it was goodbye, just a reflection. She tucked it in a drawer beside old love letters from her husband and the recipe card for her original apple pie. Then she went to bed and tried to breathe through the ache in her chest. A few days later, she collapsed in the cafe. It wasn't dramatic, just a slow slumping against the back counter, her hand reaching out for something that wasn't there. Lucas saw her first, rushing to her side as Claire screamed for someone to call 911. Thomas arrived at the hospital within the hour, face ashen, his tie askew. It was a minor cardiac episode, the doctor said. She'll need to rest. Make some changes. Eleanor lay in the hospital bed, tubes and wires tethered to her like roots. When she opened her eyes and saw Claire sitting beside her, hair messy, no makeup, hands clutching her, she blinked in confusion. You stayed? She whispered. Claire nodded, her voice thick. I'm not going anywhere. That night, they spoke quietly, beneath the beeping of monitors and the distant hum of hallway chatter. I always thought I had more time, Eleanor murmured. You still do, Claire said firmly. But not like before. It's changing now. I can feel it. Eleanor looked at her. Do you think the cafe can live without me? Claire paused. I think it can carry you. Not replace you, but carry you forward. Eleanor closed her eyes, and for the first time, didn't feel afraid of what came next. The cafe community rallied fast. Cards poured in. Dozens of customers, some strangers sent baked goods, flowers, little notes. Lucas created a wall of gratitude where people could write messages to Eleanor. Within a week, it was covered. Claire took over operations fully. She even hired 2 new staff and moved Eleanor's old office chair into the front so she could sit and talk to customers when she felt up to it. But Eleanor couldn't ignore what her body was telling her. She moved slower, forgot things sometimes. Her world, once so busy and sharp, began to soften at the edges. But there was beauty in that softness too. One morning, she sat in the cafe during the breakfast rush, sipping her tea while Claire managed the counter. A young woman approached her table, shyly holding a notebook. "Mrs. Madison?" Eleanor smiled. "Just Eleanor now, unless you're from the tax office." The girl laughed nervously. "I'm doing a project for school, about women who've changed their communities. I wanted to ask, what do you think your legacy is?" Eleanor looked at her, really looked. Then she said, "My legacy is the people sitting around you. It's the ones who walked away but found their way back. It's forgiveness served warm. And the belief that family isn't who keeps you out, it's who makes room for you, even when it's hard." The girl blinked, wide-eyed. "That's really beautiful." Eleanor smiled again. "So is this cafe." But not all changes were easy. In January, Thomas came to visit. His hands were shaking. "I've been offered a job. Out of state. Big opportunity. But..." Eleanor reached out. "You don't need my permission, Thomas." He hesitated. "What if I go and things get worse?" She squeezed his hand. "You go? You live your life. I've had mine. And I'm not done yet." Claire supported the move to encouraging him, promising to take care of everything here. And she did. In the months that followed, Claire became a quiet force. She brought structure, but also gentleness. She introduced a pay-what-you-can Sunday. She invited local musicians to play. She renamed a pie after Eleanor. Customers started calling her the heart behind the counter. And Eleanor, watching it all unfold, felt something close to peace. One day in early spring, Claire surprised her with something unexpected. "I want you to co-sign the cookbook with me," she said, sliding over the freshly printed proof. "You're not a footnote in this place. You're the headline." Eleanor held the book in her lap, hands trembling not from weakness this time, but from emotion. "You really think I still belong on the cover?" "I think," Claire said, eyes full. "You're the reason we even have a story to tell." Eleanor took her time reading every page. She smiled at Claire's additions, quotes from customers, little handwritten memories from Lucas and Thomas. On the final page was a dedication. "To the woman who taught us that family may falter, but never fails. To the one who stayed, when staying hurt. To Eleanor. You are not just the root, you are the bloom." Eleanor cried then. Quietly. No drama. Just tears of gratitude. Later that evening, she sat at her kitchen window, a one that faced the cafe, glowing across the street. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to go back in to be part of it. It was already inside her. And she was already part of it forever. Spring melted slowly into summer. The cafe was never busier. Locals, tourists, even food bloggers who'd read about the viral matriarch's apple pie post that Claire uploaded weeks earlier. Eleanor no longer worked full-time, but her presence was constant. In the scent of cinnamon, in the handwritten menu boards, and in the framed black-and-white photo of her at age 32, holding a steaming tray of biscuits. She sat now by the window every morning, tea in hand, watching the world go by from her favorite booth, the one that once felt like a battlefield, now restored as a place of reflection. Lucas sat with her often. He was different now, still the kind-hearted boy she helped raise, but steadier, stronger, no longer torn between generations. "Did you ever think we'd be here?" he asked one morning, gesturing to the crowded room. Eleanor smiled. "I hoped, but I didn't expect the best parts to come after the hardest ones." Lucas chuckled. "Claire's planning to open a second location next year, out by the highway. She wants to call it the Second Slice." Eleanor raised a brow. "Catchy. She wants you involved. Not running it. Just guiding. Stories. Recipes. Your name on the wall." Eleanor looked past him, through the window. Her reflection in the glass was softer now, wrinkled and slow-moving, but undeniably alive. "I think," she said, "that it's time for me to start letting go." Lucas frowned. "You mean retire?" "I mean release," she said. "Not disappear, but step back. Fully. Let you all carry it forward without looking over your shoulder." Lucas hesitated. Are you sure? She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I trust you. I trust Claire. And I trust the love in this place. It's not built on me. Not anymore. It's built on what we became together. Later that week, Eleanor sat with Claire on the porch of her house. The garden was blooming lavender, marigolds, even the stubborn roses she hadn't seen since her husband's funeral. Claire poured them lemonade. She looked nervous. I've been thinking, Claire said, about legacy, about what this place means. To the town, to you, to me. Eleanor sipped quietly. I think we should do something bold. A celebration. Before the second location opens. Before you officially step back. Eleanor raised a brow. Like what? A founder's dinner. Limited seats. Long tables out on Main Street. We'll serve your original menu. I want you to give a speech. Eleanor grimaced. You know I don't like public talking. Claire smiled. You faced worse than a microphone. Eleanor tilted her head. All right, but only if you're standing next to me. Claire nodded. Always. Planning took weeks. Claire took charge, but included Eleanor in every big decision. They invited past employees, longtime customers, and even some of Eleanor's old rivals in the pie-baking contests of the 90s. Local news picked it up. Reservations filled in hours. On the morning of the dinner, Eleanor stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her soft blue dress. Her fingers brushed across the old locket at her neck and side. A faded photo of her husband and a pressed daisy Lucas gave her on his 5th birthday. When she arrived, the street had transformed. Long wooden tables stretched between lamp posts. String lights hung above like stars waiting to wake up. The scent of roasted chicken, baked rolls, and caramelized peaches filled the air. People clapped when she stepped out of the car. Not out of duty, but affection. Real, tangible, warm. Claire met her halfway. Ready? Eleanor took her hand. Let's begin. The dinner was laughter and tears and memory. They served the dishes from her earliest menus, roasted tomato soup, herb biscuits, and of course, apple pie. Old customers shared stories about first dates, anniversaries, healing conversations, all that had happened within the walls of the cafe. Finally, Claire walked up to the small stage near the end of the street. She held the mic, nervous, and then cleared her throat. I used to be the woman who banned Eleanor from dinner, she said. Laughter, gasps, murmurs. It's true. Some of you remember. Some of you heard. I was the outsider. The daughter-in-law who didn't know how to belong. But Eleanor? She didn't slam the door. She pulled up a chair. Claire turned to her. She taught me that family isn't born, it's chosen. Earned. Held tightly, even when it's messy. Then she handed the microphone to Eleanor. Eleanor looked out at the crowd, faces lit by candlelight, by love. When I was younger, she began, I thought strength looked like doing everything yourself. Raising boys alone. Running a cafe. Standing tall, even when you're tired. She paused. Her voice softened. But I was wrong. Strength is asking for help. Strength is forgiving someone who hurt you. And strength, she said, looking at Claire, is choosing to love again, even when you've been shut out. A hush fell. I'm proud of what we've built, she said. Not just the food, not just this place, but this family, because it didn't come easy, and that makes it worth everything. She raised her glass. To second chances, and to the tables we never stopped making room at. The crowd stood. Applause roared. Lucas wiped his eyes. Thomas sent a text from out of state, streaming, crying, I love you. That night, Eleanor lay in bed, fully clothed, unable to sleep, not from pain or worry, but fullness. The kind that settles in your bones when a chapter truly closes. The next morning, she went into the cafe one last time before her official retirement. It wasn't really goodbye. Esht still stopped by, still bake on holidays, but she needed a clean moment of release. She stepped behind the counter, ran her hand across the worn wood, looked at the chalkboard, the smudges, the shelf of recipe books. Then she reached under the counter and pulled out a yellowed envelope, her original apple pie recipe. She walked it to Claire. This belongs with you now, she said. Claire took it, reverently. You sure? Eleanor nodded. It's not just a recipe. It's a map, and you've learned how to read it. Months passed. The second location opened. Claire gave an interview to a national food magazine. Lucas proposed to his girlfriend at the booth, of course. And Eleanor? She began writing her memoir. In longhand, with tea beside her and an old radio playing Ella Fitzgerald in the background. She titled it, The Table I Wasn't Invited to. And in the first chapter, she wrote, "There was a time I thought being pushed away was the end. But sometimes, being pushed out is just the beginning of walking your own way in. And when you finally sit back down, you don't just reclaim your place. You remake the table itself." On warm evenings, she walked to the cafe and sat outside with Claire, no longer afraid of what was or what would come. The pain was part of the legacy. So was the healing. So was the pie. And the love that rose again. Every single time.